One question I've heard over the years is, how do I know if what I'm feeling is intuition? It's an interesting question because what we're feeling in any given moment may not be intuition at all. It could be fear, it could be anxiety, it could be excitement or hope. Uh, it could be an expectation we've become attached to. It can even be an old wound that's still influencing how we interpret a situation. Have you ever found yourself facing an important decision and wondering whether what you're feeling is intuition or whether you're reacting out of fear? Or perhaps you wanted a particular outcome so badly that it became difficult to separate what you hoped would happen from what is actually happening. I think this is one of the most common questions people have when they begin exploring intuition. And we ask things like, how do I know the difference? How do I know whether what I'm feeling is intuition or is it fear or anxiety? Could it be hope or simply my own expectations? I don't think the answer is always as straightforward as we would like it to be. One of the reasons this can be so confusing is because all of these experiences are happening within us. They don't arrive neatly labeled. Fear doesn't announce itself. Anxiety doesn't introduce itself. And intuition rarely arrives with the certainty that we expect. Instead, we often find ourselves trying to interpret what we're feeling while we're already emotionally invested in the outcome. That's where things get complicated. If we're worried about something, fear may convince us that we're being intuitive. If we're deeply attached to a particular outcome, we may find ourselves focusing more on what we hoped is true than what we're actually seeing. And if we've experienced disappointment or betrayal, rejection or loss in the past, those experiences may influence how we interpret what we're feeling here in the present. And this is one of those reasons that self-awareness is so important. The better we understand our own fears, our emotional triggers, hopes and expectations, and recurring patterns, the easier it becomes to recognize what may actually be speaking to us. In my experience, fear is often focused on what could happen. It projects forward into the future. It imagines possibilities, worst case scenarios, and outcomes that haven't even happened yet. Sometimes that can be helpful. Sometimes it can prevent us from walking blindly into a situation that deserves a closer look. But the problem is that fear isn't always accurate. Sometimes it's responding to an old experience rather than the situation we're actually facing. Intuition feels different. It's it's subtle. Intuition doesn't always arrive with this big dramatic warning or a detailed explanation. It may simply be a feeling that something deserves a closer look. It may be a sense that something isn't aligning the way it appears on the surface. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet knowing that stays consistent even while our emotions fluctuate around it. That doesn't necessarily make intuition right every time. We're human. We can misinterpret things, and we often do. We can project our fears and hopes and assumptions onto a situation without even realizing it, which is why I think self-awareness matters so much, just as much as intuition itself. The more honestly we understand ourselves, the easier it becomes to recognize the lens through which we're viewing a situation. Are we, reacting from fear? Are we reacting from a previous disappointment? Are we attached to this particular outcome? Are we overlooking something because we so desperately want it to work? Those questions can often tell us how much, or often tell us just as much as the feeling itself. This is one of the reasons why I appreciate numerology so much. Numerology doesn't make decisions for us, and it certainly doesn't replace intuition. But what it does do is it helps us recognize patterns that may be influencing the way we're interpreting our experiences. Sometimes those patterns reveal where we've been operating from fear. Sometimes they reveal where we've been giving our power away. Sometimes they will reveal recurring lessons, challenges, or emotional responses that have been quietly shaping our decisions for years. And when we begin seeing those patterns more clearly, it often becomes easier to understand ourselves more honestly. I don't think the goal is becoming perfect at recognizing intuition, but I do think the goal is definitely becoming more self-aware. The more familiar we become with our fears, the more familiar we become with our hopes and expectations, and familiar with those emotional triggers and recurring patterns, the easier it becomes to recognize what may actually be influencing the way that we're thinking and feeling. Because what we're experiencing isn't always just one thing. There may be intuition present, but there may also be fear present. There may be hope, excitement, uh, uncertainty, and emotional attachment present as well. The important part isn't always figuring out perfectly in the moment. The important part is learning to slow down long enough to examine what we're feeling rather than immediately reacting to it. For me, that's where self-awareness becomes so valuable. The more honestly we understand ourselves, the more clearly we begin seeing the difference between our fears and those hopes and our conditioning and our genuine inner knowing. And perhaps that's the real value in intuition. It doesn't always give us certainty. It doesn't always guarantee we'll always make the right decision, but because it encourages us to pay closer attention to ourselves, our experiences, and the patterns that continue to shape our lives. If this conversation resonates with you, my name is Priscilla Daphney. I share reflective guidance around intuition, self-awareness, numerology, emotional healing, and the patterns that shape our lives here on this channel. I also offer privately prepared numerology reports for those of us who want to explore our own patterns more deeply. One of the reasons that I prefer the way that I approach this is because it gives you time to sit with the information without needing to process everything during a live call or a rushed session. I prepare the report using your unique numerology chart and send it directly to you so you can read through it, reflect on it, and come back to it whenever you feel called to. What I find most valuable is not simply learning what our numbers are, it is beginning to recognize the recurring themes and patterns and our strengths and challenges, learning lessons that have been showing up through our lives, often without us fully realizing it. Sometimes the report will validate things we have always known about ourselves, but never had a language for. Sometimes it highlights patterns we have been repeating for years. And sometimes it simply offers just a different perspective on where we've been, where we are now, and what season of life we may be moving through. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can learn more at priscilladaphne.com. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next video.